Okay, so picture this, right? Friday evening, Northeast Philly. It's, the start of the weekend. People are heading home from work, maybe grabbing some takeout, like just normal Friday night stuff.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, boom, a medical transport jet crashes. Like just moments after takeoff.
Oh.
Yeah, an immediate fireball, engulfing houses, like right there near Cottman and Roosevelt.
I mean, it's hard to even imagine a scene like that.
Yeah, you can't really picture it unless you see it.
Right, and what makes this even more, I don't know, impactful, I guess, is that this isn't just about, like, a plane malfunctioning. We're talking about 6 people on board, all with lives, families, just caught up in this sudden, horrible event.
Exactly. And there was a pediatric patient on board, too,
Wow.
along with a crew and another passenger. They were headed to Springfield, Missouri. And you mentioned the human side of this. And the sources, they really bring that home. Like one witness described the whole thing as earthquake-ish.
Yeah.
Another one saw the sky just light up as the plane exploded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It makes you think about what was going through their minds, right, in those moments. Just the shock, the fear, the uncertainty.
Absolutely. And not knowing what happened to everyone on board, it's agonizing, right?
Mm.
And the sources, they say there's no confirmation of survivors yet, and it's just, it's hitting those families hard, waiting for news.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack here. So let's try to dive into what we actually know for sure. So January 31st, 2025, a Learjet 55, it's a medical transport plane, takes off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport, operated by a company called Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. And then, shortly after takeoff, it crashes.
Right, and that crash, it causes this massive fire.
Yeah.
Impacting homes and vehicles, like, all around the crash site. It's just tragic.
Totally. There was this one detail in the sources that I couldn't get out of my head. There was a witness at a nearby gas station who described seeing debris, including what looked like a human foot.
Oh.
I know. It's a tough detail to hear, and it kind of just makes you think about, this isn't just some abstract news story, you know what I mean? Like these are real people whose lives have been, cut short.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sources, they've reported multiple injuries too, both at the scene and in the surrounding area. People were rushed to Temple University Hospital, and like we said, there's, still no word on survivors. And, while we're waiting for more information, there's a, kind of bigger question that comes to mind.
What's that?
Well, we had another really major aviation incident just 2 days ago, right? In D.C. A mid-air collision that, everyone on board died.
Wow, 2 major crashes in just a couple of days.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Are there any connections? Are there, issues with aviation safety that we need to address?
It does make you wonder, are these just isolated incidents, or is there something, more going on, something systemic at play? We need to understand if there are, any patterns here that could point to, bigger safety concerns.
Okay, so I guess that's where the investigations come in, right? I mean,
yeah.
We know both the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, and the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, are involved. What are their roles in all of this?
Okay, so the FAA, you can kind of think of them as the regulators of the skies, right?
Okay.
They oversee everything, about civil aviation here in the U.S., making sure airlines and pilots follow all the safety rules.
Yeah.
So they're going to be looking at the, the big picture, like pilot training, the plane's maintenance records, even the weather at the time of the crash.
So they're making sure everyone was playing by the rules, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about the NTSB? What are they focused on?
Well, think of them as, the aviation detectives. Their job is to, figure out exactly what caused the crash.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so they're the ones that will be combing through the wreckage, analyzing the black box data, even using software to, recreate the flight path. It's really intricate,
Wow, so they're literally piecing together this puzzle, just trying to get to the bottom of what went wrong. But, with so many factors, right, like mechanical issues, human error, those external conditions, where do they even begin?
Well, it is a complex investigation, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be looking at everything. I mean, everything from the plane's history to the pilot's actions to weather conditions and, even things like bird strikes.
Wow, okay. There's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time to get those answers. And while investigators, do their work, the company that operated the flight, Jet Rescue Air Ambulance, they released a statement. They expressed concern for everyone involved, but they could only confirm that the pediatric patient was among the passengers. Can you imagine, just the anguish of those families waiting for any kind of news? It's heartbreaking. It really just, underscores the human side of all of this. Behind every statistic, every investigation, there are real people going through, unimaginable loss.
That is such a powerful point. This isn't just about data and reports. It's about lives, families, and a community that's forever going to be impacted by this event.
Right. And that's why these investigations are so important. They're not about pointing fingers. It's about understanding what went wrong so that we can try to prevent this from happening again.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got the immediate aftermath, the human impact, and the beginning of the investigation. But we also have these, like, pretty intriguing details, emerging from the sources that paint a picture of what actually happened.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the doorbell camera footage and that witness who found what seemed to be, a human foot.
Oh, yeah. Those are details that, definitely stay with you. Let's unpack those next.
It's one thing to hear about a plane crash, but it's another thing entirely to, actually see it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what makes the doorbell camera footage from this crash, like, so powerful.
Right.
We literally see this plane descending, almost like it's, like, trying to glide, and then bam, explosion, a flash of light, smoke just, like, everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal to watch.
It is.
Just, this everyday thing, a doorbell camera capturing this, like, incredibly rare event. And the way it happens so fast, it really makes you think about how, fragile life is.
Oddly.
1 minute, things are normal, and the next, it's chaos.
And that suddenness, that's what makes this crash so hard to even, like, comprehend.
Yeah.
But think about it, though. That footage, it could be a key piece of evidence for investigators.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're living in a time when cameras are, like, everywhere.
Right.
And that's got to be changing how these investigations go down.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you've got traffic cameras, security systems, people with dash cams. It's like having 100 extra pairs of eyes on these things, all offering different perspectives. It's a game changer for investigators, especially when, you think about it, there probably weren't a lot of eyewitnesses who had, like, a clear view of what happened.
Yeah, that's true. It's like a digital puzzle, and investigators have to put it all together.
Right.
Speaking of puzzles, that that detail about the witness finding what looked like a human foot?
Yeah.
That's something I can't get out of my head.
It's a tough detail to hear,
Uh-huh.
but it also says a lot about the force of the impact and how big this debris field is. It makes you think about what the investigators are dealing with, trying to find and identify every little piece.
Got to be like finding a needle in a haystack, but with incredibly high stakes.
Yeah, it's a painstaking work. They have to pay attention to every single detail. And it's not just about the technical stuff, it's about identifying the victims and helping the families find some closure, which can take a long time. It's emotionally challenging, especially when, you have remains that are in bad shape.
Yeah, it makes you realize that investigations like this, they're not just about black boxes and technical reports, right?
Right.
There's a really human element at the heart of it all.
Definitely. Yeah, you have the NTSB, going through everything, trying to figure out the sequence of events. And then you have the families who are just, waiting for news and hoping for answers.
So the big question everyone is asking is, could this have been prevented?
Right.
I know we talked about those two recent crashes, this one, the one in D.C. It's hard not to wonder if there's some kind of connection.
Yeah, it makes sense to look for patterns, especially when this happens, so close together. Investigators will definitely be looking for any links, whether it has to do with air traffic control, pilot training, or even, something bigger with aircraft maintenance.
It's like they're solving a mystery,
Yeah.
and every detail, every piece of evidence could be a clue.
Right.
You mentioned, the NTSB, those aviation detectives. Can you talk a little more about what their investigation might look like? Like, how long could this take?
Well, first you have to understand this is, like, incredibly complex and it takes a long time.
Yeah.
They'll start by, going over the wreckage carefully, looking for signs of damage, any malfunctions, stuff like that. And then they'll analyze the flight data recorders, the black boxes, to see what was going on with the plane systems and what the pilot was doing before the crash.
So they're looking for anything that stands out.
Exactly. Anything that could explain what happened. They'll also talk to witnesses, look at radar data, weather reports, maintenance logs, even the air traffic control recordings. It's about putting together a timeline, a complete picture of what happened.
So it's not about just one smoking gun.
Right.
It's about understanding the whole thing.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this could take a long time, months, maybe even years to finish. You can't rush to conclusions until you have all the evidence.
Patience is key.
Yeah.
We have to let them do their work, even though it's hard to wait for those answers.
Absolutely. And while we wait, it's important to think about, the human side of this. Those families are going through a lot right now.
Yeah. Their lives have been totally upended. It's
Right.
hard to imagine what they're going through.
And that's why, support systems are so important in situations like this. Grief counseling, family support groups, just knowing that people care can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's about coming together to help them get through this.
Exactly. And while nothing can really, take away the pain, showing compassion and understanding can help them, navigate this really tough time.
As we're talking about all of this, I keep thinking about all the other families out there who've been through something similar. It makes you wonder, if we can learn anything from this to prevent future crashes.
That's the question everyone is asking, right? And it's one that investigators and aviation experts will be looking at for years. It's about looking at safety rules, pushing for new technology, and making sure the aviation industry is transparent and accountable.
Because at the end of the day, safety has to be the top priority.
Absolutely.
Every time we get on a plane, we're putting our trust in a really complex system, and it's got to be as safe as possible.
Yeah. And that means putting money into research, training, and safety assessments so we can minimize those risks and make sure every flight is as safe as it can be.
It's about, like you said, learning from our mistakes and constantly trying to improve.
Right. We can never get complacent when it comes to keeping passengers and crews safe.
That's a great point. So I think it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that's, both fascinating and a little bit unsettling. The fact that technology can actually capture these kinds of events.
Okay.
I mean, we've already talked about the doorbell camera footage, but it goes way beyond that, right?
It does. I mean, think about it. We live in a world where cameras are everywhere. Traffic cameras, security systems, smartphones, those doorbell cameras, they're always recording.
Right.
And it makes you think about things like privacy and surveillance and how technology is impacting our lives.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword.
Right.
On the one hand, these recordings can help us understand what happened and maybe prevent future accidents.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it makes you think about being monitored all the time.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a conversation we need to have as a society. How do we, keep the good parts of technology while still protecting people's privacy?
Exactly. It's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not. But it's one we can't ignore.
So for now, let's stick with the good side of all of this.
Okay.
The fact that we have this footage of the crash, it gives investigators, a really big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And not just in this case. Think about all the other times camera footage has helped solve crimes, identify people, and even prove that someone was innocent.
It's like having a witness who doesn't lie. It just shows you what happened.
And that's a powerful thing, especially when, eyewitnesses can get things wrong.
The takeaway here is that technology is changing how investigations work, for better or worse. But in this case, it seems like it's helped investigators a lot.
Absolutely. And as technology keeps getting better, it's going to play an even bigger role in investigations, from plane crashes to criminal cases to everything.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting, but also a little scary to think about.
Right.
But for now, let's get back to this crash. We've talked about the investigation, the human impact, the big picture, but there are these, small details in the sources that really make this real.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about that witness who found what looked like a human foot.
Right. It's a detail that, really gets to you. It reminds you that this isn't just some abstract event. It's a tragedy that, has impacted real people.
And it brings up another part of this investigation that we haven't really talked about, the identification process.
Right. That's a crucial part, but it's also one of the hardest.
It's not just about figuring out what happened to the plane. It's about finding out who the victims were and giving their families some closure.
Exactly. And, when you have something like this where the impact was so bad and the debris is everywhere, it can be really tough.
Yeah. I can't imagine what those families are going through, waiting to hear if their loved one has been identified, just hoping. It's got to be awful.
It's a nightmare. And it shows how important it is to be kind and supportive during these times. Those families need to know that people care and that they're not alone.
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for now.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot, from the crash itself to the investigation to the role of technology and how all of this is impacting people.
We've talked about the technical stuff, the search for answers, and the emotional side of it all.
But there's still more to talk about, so we'll continue our deep dive after a quick break.
Okay, so, we've talked a lot about like the technical parts of this plane crash, the investigations, all the evidence, but I kind of want to go back to something we talked about before.
Okay.
Like that witness at the gas station who found what looked like a human foot.
Yeah.
I don't know, that detail just really stuck with me.
It is a pretty haunting image.
Yeah. And it really makes you think about how powerful that impact was. It's hard to really understand, you know what I mean, like the magnitude of what happened, how violent it was until you hear something like that.
Right, and it makes you remember that, behind all the technical stuff and the investigations and the procedures, there were actual people,
Yeah.
real people who died in this crash, and their families waiting for answers, hoping and having to deal with that reality. It's awful.
It really does put things in perspective. While investigators are focused on the wreckage, trying to put all the pieces together, there are families dealing with this incredible loss and all this uncertainty, waiting for identification, just holding on to any bit of hope they can.
And even that, the identification process, that's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just about finding a name. It's about, helping those left behind move on.
Absolutely. It's a vital part of the investigation, but it's also one of the most sensitive and difficult parts. Just imagine, They're analyzing DNA, comparing dental records, trying to put together remains that are in pieces. It can take weeks, even months to figure out who each victim is.
And during all of that, families are stuck,
Yeah.
They don't know for sure, and they're just, waiting for any news. I can't even imagine what that must be like.
It's a terrible situation, and it really shows why support is so important,
Yeah.
Grief counseling, family support groups, just knowing that people care. These things can help a lot during a time like this.
It's about, offering comfort and understanding.
Yeah.
Right? Helping them get through this.
Exactly. And, while nothing can really take away the pain of what happened, being there for them can help them, deal with all of this.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about, all the other families who've been through something like this, families who've lost someone in a plane crash. It makes you wonder if there's anything we can learn from tragedies like this, anything we can do to prevent them from happening again.
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that investigators and aviation experts are going to be, thinking about for a long time. It's about making sure our safety protocols are good, looking for new technologies and creating a culture of, openness and accountability in the aviation industry.
Because in the end, safety has to be the most important thing, right?
Right.
Every time we get on a plane, we're trusting this big, complicated system. And, that system needs to be as strong as possible.
Definitely. And that means investing in research, in training, and doing those ongoing safety checks so we can reduce those risks and make sure that every single flight is as safe as it can be. It's about learning from the past, always trying to get better, and never thinking that we've done enough when it comes to passenger and crew safety.
I think that's a really good point and a good, takeaway for everyone listening today. This crash in Northeast Philadelphia, it really makes you think about, how fragile life is and how important it is to never let up when it comes to safety.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing that's affected so many people, and we still don't have all the answers. But it's also, a wake-up call, I guess you could say. It reminds us that we always need to be working to make flying safer and more reliable for everyone.
We've talked about a lot today, the crash, the investigations, the effect this has had on people.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, this isn't just a news story. It's something that's going to stay with us for a long time.
Yeah. And as we go forward, it's really important to remember those who died, to support their families, and to learn everything we can from this so it doesn't happen again. It's about honoring them by making air travel safer for everyone.
I think that's a great place to end our deep dive for today. Thank you all for joining us. And, keep learning, keep asking questions, and let's all keep exploring this really important topic of aviation safety.